Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Nice to see all of you. Lots of familiar faces. My name's Denise Ward. I'm with the Friends of the Aptos Library. And in case you haven't heard, we now have a library. It's magnificent. And sadly, we couldn't have our event there because when we planned it, we didn't know if we would have a library. So I'd like to say thank you to Rowan. She is our Community Reads librarian and our tech person.
Yay.
We
And on the front page of the Aptos.
Yes, she got her 15 minutes of fame. And thank you to all the volunteers. We have so many volunteers now. Our committee is about 25 strong. We have Scotts Valley, Felton, Capitola, La Selva Beach, and they're doing amazing work. There's two volunteers that I would like to thank tonight because they're kind of, well, one's more behind the scenes than the other, but one is standing back there with his camera, and that's Jim Bourne. So not only does he do all the photography, but he's the one who does all the graphic design. He does our beautiful calendar that she's holding right there. And so we really couldn't do a lot without Jim. And the other person I wanted to thank is Ophelia Garcia, who's right here. She's our webmaster. She does all of our emails, and she's updating our website constantly, and it's a lot of work, except that right now. Thank you to Norma Jeans in Aptos. They donated the coffee. She was really excited to do it. And speaking of coffee, we are giving away some Yemeni coffee, and well, it didn't work very well. We had stuck something under people's seats, but it actually fell down because I witnessed it. It's underneath one of your chairs. So everybody look under your chair. So the other person we've had the good fortune of getting to know is Geneffa Jahan. Some of you who came to our author talk last year might remember that she moderated our talk. And she's a big supporter of our program, and we're very thankful that she's agreed to moderate tonight. Geneffa teaches composition and creative writing at Cabrillo in the English department. She's been there since the year 2000. In 2016, she formed the Salam Initiative on campus to partner with the local Muslim solidarity group to support students affected by the Muslim ban. And she is going to introduce you to tonight's speaker.
Hello, thank you, Denise. Thank you everyone for being here today in this beautiful facility. It's so great to have people get together and enjoy these events, even when we have a virtual visitor like this. This sort of a hybrid setup, I think, is such a privilege for us to be able to do. So thank you all for being here. And because it is a live event, but Jehan is with us, I'll introduce her in a moment over Zoom. We're going to ask that we keep the volume down over here so that our friendly owl won't pick up our little wayward noises. And also, we're going to have Jehan talk to us about her experiences, and there will be a chance for questions and answers at the end. So if you are thinking of questions, do go ahead and write them down on the card. My daughter Madeline is going to come around with cards and pencils if anyone would still like to keep them on hand. And you never know, you may think of something to ask at the end, and we have allowed time for that. All right. So then without further ado, let me say we are absolutely thrilled to be here at the Capitola Library with Jehan Hakim joining us from Houston, Texas. And when our event coordinator, Denise Ward, was looking for a Yemeni-American speaker, the unequivocal recommendation was Jehan Hakim. She has been called a voice for Yemeni Americans. Her impressive CV attests that she has been a community organizer and educator for decades. Her experience spans from program management and coordination, culturally responsive training within school districts, to interfaith coalition building, community outreach, foreign affairs, and independent consulting. She states that as a consultant, I focus on empowering educators, school districts, and organizational leaders to create environments that celebrate differences and promote equity. In addition to her work with families and communities, Jehan maintains a blog, writes poetry, and articles. And her writing is gorgeous and can be read at 99 Clay Vessels, the Muslim Women's Storytelling Project, and other places as well, medium.com, etc. All of this made her a must-have for this season's read. So imagine our surprise to discover that while she now makes her home in Houston, Texas, she grew up in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, just like the Monk of Mocha's protagonist, Mukhtar al-Kanshali. So when I asked her about this, Jehan said, actually, Mukhtar and his siblings and I went to the same mosque, Masjid al-Tawhid in San Francisco, on the weekends for Arabic Quran school, though he was much younger than I. We were involved together in the AAYSP, that's the American Association for Yemeni Students and Professionals. And she says, Yemeni Americans tend to be a tight-knit community, and we know someone who knows someone who knows someone. Well, we are so lucky to be a chance to be one of those someones that gets to know Jehan tonight. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Is my audio okay?
It's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Oh, wow. Thank you, Geneffa. I am so humbled by your introduction. I feel all warm and fuzzy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining today. And I hope that today you'll hear maybe some interesting stories. Maybe you'll learn something new. And like Geneffa said, I'm open to your questions if at all. You see the slides and you hear some of my storytelling. And if it's interesting to you, I welcome them. Even if it's not today, I'll leave my contact information. I'll be happy to hear from you all. Okay, so like Geneffa said, I am from the Bay Area, born and raised. San Francisco, the Tenderloin was my home. I still have family who live there. And today I'm going to be sharing briefly about the place that I call home, my other home, which is Yemen. I'll talk a little bit about our culture, provide some geography, because I think a lot of times, places that are far away, there isn't a lot of visuals, that help kind of orient us to where this place is. You hear a lot about Yemen, but may not know where it is exactly. And then I'll touch on a little bit of foreign policy and how those challenges have impacted Yemeni Americans and Yemenis abroad. And like I said, a little bit of storytelling, because storytelling is a lost art, right?
Well,
okay.
Hopefully not lost, but we can always use more.
Right.
Great.
Okay, so I'll begin. Is my cue, Geneffa, to begin?
Yes, this sounds
okay.
good.
Okay, great. Okay, so we hear a lot about the Arab world, and here's a visual of the Arab nations. Actually, Arab nations consist of 22 countries in the Middle East. Algeria, Bahrain, the Comoros Island, Djibouti, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, Mauritania, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, and Yemen, because it's all the way at the end. Yeah, so the Middle East and North Africa are a diverse, complex, complex group of regions that cannot simply be defined as the Arab world. I mean, I think the only reason why we have that in common is because we speak Arabic. There's no such thing actually as the Arab world, but rather a collection of distinct Arab countries. I strongly encourage folks to look up Edward Said, who coined the term Orientalism, to develop a deeper understanding of the term the Middle East, which many of us view as a Western invention. The whole concept of referring to anything outside of the UK and the Americas as Eastern is to deliberately distinguish it from the West, because the West is civilized, whereas the East needs civilizing or democratizing. So a little bit about Yemen's demographics. Like I said, it's a part of the quote unquote Arab world, and the map here on the right gives us an idea of Yemen's borders. So Yemen borders Saudi Arabia and Oman. It's a boat ride away from Djibouti, which is in the Horn of Africa. We have a population of almost 30 million, give or take, similar to that of Venezuela. 80% of Yemen's population live in the northern part of Yemen, whereas the rest live in the southern part of Yemen. 40% of Yemenis are under the age of 16, and the spoken language is Arabic, and it is a Muslim majority country. If we were to have like an equivalent when it comes to our currency, $1 is equivalent to 250 riyals. So you would imagine somebody who is 100 or 1,000 in America would be quite wealthy in Yemen because of that difference. A little bit about our history, because I love history. I'm a history buff. Yemen, once upon a time, was a piece of heaven on earth. Historically, the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula was known as Al-Yemen al-Sa'id, or Happy Yemen. It was called this because of its geography and its natural climate. Rainfall, valleys, and rivers. Yemen was a fertile ground. It was the greenest region, which ancient Romans called it Arabia Felix, or also known as Happy Arabia. It's a country with a rich historical and cultural heritage. The capital of Sana'a, for example, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It is over 2,500 years old. And Yemen is the first place in the world that coffee was made a beverage. And its origins of coffee and the origins of the coffee trade, I think Yemenis and Ethiopians, we fight over this. But Yemen is also home to quite a few UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which I shared here in this slide. Over there to the left, you'll see really high towers or buildings in Shaybam, which is in the southern part of Yemen. It was called the Manhattan of the desert, was built on a hill to escape the floods of Wadi Hadramaut. It's a dense setting of its mud brick tower houses, goes back to all the way back to the 16th century. And then over here to the middle, we have the Barren Temple, which is mentioned in both the Bible and the Quran. It's the throne of Bilqis, or the pillars of Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba, or the Queen of Saba. And then also to the right there, we have Bab al-Yemen, and that is in Sana'a. It's the old fortified wall on the southern extremity of the walled city of Sana'a, and it dates back all the way to 17th century. I have actually been there myself. My family lives in sort of the central part of Yemen, in a city called Ib. I think Ib is beautiful. It reminds me a lot of San Francisco. like its mountains and its valleys and its weather as well. So here I'll share a little bit about Yemeni culture. Yemenis are known for their generosity and hospitality. We dearly value family and honor and dignity, and food, like Geneffa mentioned, is really important. And some of the dishes that are unique to Yemen are, and pardon me, one of the pictures turned out to be a little bit stretched. But I hope if you guys are ever in the Bay Area, you can go to, there are a couple of Yemeni restaurants, one or two in San Francisco, then a couple more in Oakland. But Aslid here to the bottom in the middle, Aslid is a porridge-like, but much thicker, and it's eaten by the hands, and it's consumed with soup in the middle, like gravy sauce, and it's nice for, especially in the winter season. And then over there to the left, the bottom left, is bint as-sahin. Bint as-sahin actually means daughter of the plate when it's translated over to English, but it's basically a pastry made of flour, eggs, and ghee or butter, and sprinkled with black seed, and most importantly, local Yemeni honey. Yemen is also known for authentic honey that is very healthy, and we use it for medicinal purposes. But bint as-sahin is a delicacy that we eat on various occasions, because it takes a long time to make, because it's, a very thin slice of dough, and many layers, up to 20 or 30 layers. So obviously, myself, with my busy schedule, I do not have time to make it, but I love to enjoy it when my mom makes it. And then I have shared here some photos of clothing in Yemen. And here to the top left, men wear clothing called a thobe, which is a long white robe. And then you see there a dagger, or a jembia, is worn across as a belt. It is actually tribal tradition, it's not used as a weapon. And depending what tribe one is from, then they can kind of tell based on the embroidery and the design, and also the handle, whether it's made of wood or other material. And there to the right, you have Yemeni women dressed in a different kind of handmade, colorful embroideries, which are, used tie-dyeing techniques. And there's a sitada that is really unique to Yemen, which is in the color scheme that you see here, which is black, red, and yellow. Also there to the bottom, we have cute children that are from Sana'a. Sana'a is the capital. And you see the young boy wearing a jambia as well, and then the girl wearing a robe or a jalabiya, also using embroidery in the middle. So, the migration of Yemenis, what was once North Yemen was part of the Ottoman Empire during the 19th and early 20th centuries. And then the South fell under British influence from the mid 1800s. For like over 120 years, it was a British colony. So in about the mid 1800s, the establishment of the British Proctor in Aden, which is in southern Yemen, consolidated the colonial and political and economic connections that would draw Yemeni labor and immigrants to Britain, and they later on to the United States. So Yemenis began migrating to the United States in significant numbers during the late 19th century. The earliest Yemeni immigrants were sailors and traders who settled in port cities like New York and Detroit and, the Bay Area. However, larger waves of Yemeni migration occurred during the mid 20th century and continued in the following decades. And as political tensions grow, we find an influx of migration. I think in the 60s and 70s, there's more significant numbers of Yemenis who migrated to the United States. And that's when actually my family came. And traditionally, Yemenis started off as toiling in the fields of California as farm workers. And then in Detroit, there's a huge concentration of Yemenis in Detroit. They call Detroit the Yemen outside of Yemen because of how many Yemenis there are there. They were auto workers at the time. So both British and US imperialism in Yemen and in the Middle East not only enforced labor migration, but continuously shaped the experience of Yemeni workers and families in the diaspora. Yemeni migration to the US has been shaped by various factors, including economic conditions, political changes, and family reunification. The Yemeni-American community has grown with individuals and families contributing to diverse sectors across the country. Yemenis are the sixth largest group of Arab immigrants to come to the US since the 1960s. And like other Arabs, Yemenis suffered greatly due to the Gulf War in 90 and 91. In fact, a lot of Yemenis lost their jobs permanently as a result of this war. So let's see here. Yeah, I included a lot of the reasons, and I think the family reunification piece was a really important one because initially when Yemenis migrated to the States, including a lot of my family members, it was the men who started off to try to establish themselves and try to settle down before bringing their wives and children. So that family reunification piece was really, really important. Here it looks like a whole bunch of rectangles to you all. I just wanted to share it, and I will send over to Geneffa and probably Denise. I'm happy to share my slides and also a link, but the Yemeni-American Merchants Association, also known as YAMA in New York, did a really good job at providing a snapshot of a timeline for when Yemenis were entering the US. And I've mentioned some of them already, and I'll mention some more actually in the coming slides, but I thought to just share this really quickly, and there's more to come. You'll see the graphics are amazing on their website. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Nagi Leifallah. Maybe a show of hands if you have, and if you haven't, it's okay too. Okay, not many folks. All right. So Nagi Leifallah is a prominent figure in the Yemeni-American community. After immigrating from Yemen at the age of 24, Nagi Leifallah learned Arabic and English. I'm sorry, he learned English and Spanish. He came with Arabic, and he was a leader among Arab strikers during the UFW, the United Farm Workers, massive 1973 walkouts. But unfortunately, Kern County, which is over there in the valley, like in Bakersfield, there was a sheriff there that got into an altercation with Nagi Leifallah, who himself was non-violent, was unarmed, but he ended up, trigger warning for a little bit of violence. He ended up hitting him over the head with a metal flashlight, and then dragged him by his feet to the pavement, where he later died in the hospital. Unfortunately, the deputy was never charged, but thousands of farm workers followed Nagi's casket, as you can see here, in a somber memorial. And you can see here, Cesar Chavez was among them. Cesar Chavez joined the workers wearing black armbands and holding black UFW flags, honoring Nagi Leifallah's life. The Arab workers said a Yemeni worker was dying outside of the country, that it was not honorable, that they wanted to ship his body back home to be buried in his homeland. And the UFW arranged for that to happen. So he ended up, he was buried in his homeland of Yemen. Cesar Chavez said that many people perform daily acts of charity or idealism, but only a relative few totally dedicate their lives to serving the neediest among us. Cesar placed the 5 Union martyrs, and including Nagi Leifallah among them, and an even higher category because they literally gave their lives for the cause. So oftentimes, a lot of us who are community organizers in the community, when we're trying to seek representation or role models, we remember Nagi Leifallah and his fight for equality. And here I'm going to talk about something that is sort of grim, but the history of the US and the role in Yemen. And it's, some of it is a little bit ugly, but I think it's important to know, to understand. So I'm just going to highlight just a few policies that have that predate the violence that is occurring right now, because we know that there is violence occurring right now, and how for the past 20 years, the war on terror ever since 9/11, ever since that tragic event, it has created so many other tragedies and has impacted Yemen and a lot of other Muslim majority countries in many ways. So, since 9/11, America has militarized every aspect of its foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East, and with long-standing tensions between values and interests, tilted abruptly in favor of an extreme counter-terror approach. And here's a brief list of some of those policies. So drafted in the hours after 9/11, after the 9/11 attacks, and passed only 3 days later as a 60-word resolution authorizing the president to take action against those responsible or those perceived to be responsible for the attacks on September 11th. And one of them is the AUMF, which is also known as authorization to use military force. It's an open-ended nature. Its open-ended nature means that the 2001 law has been used to justify some of the most significant national security policy and military operations ever since 9/11. Not just in Yemen, but for many other countries. So it has meant routine drone strikes. So until today, so ever since Bush until today, there have been routine drone strikes in Yemen and Pakistan, Somalia, and Sudan. The AUMF has been used to justify an array of civilian casualties abroad. It justifies the invasion of Afghanistan, airstrikes on Iraq and Syria. In addition to that is the Patriot Act, which was hastily passed 45 days after 9/11, also in the name of national security. It was the first of many changes to surveillance laws that made it easier for the government to spy on ordinary Americans, So in addition to that, another swift response to 9/11 was Guantanamo Bay, which is still open until today. Guantanamo Bay, or that whole system, detained and tortured Yemeni nationals and many other nationals from Arab and Muslim majority countries. In addition to that, the NSEERS program, which was the old Muslim registry. Basically, it was systemic anti-Muslim policy where young Muslim men specifically were registered and screened, entering the US, exiting the US, a lot of FBI harassment, racial profiling. Also, the war on Yemen, which in 2015, President Obama gave Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates the green light to launch airstrikes on Yemen, escalating what was a civil war into a regional inferno. And I think you mentioned the Muslim ban, Geneffa, but also the Muslim ban was put in place by Trump in 2017. It also blocked Yemenis and those from other Muslim majority countries from reuniting or entering the States. I used to work in the Asian Law Caucus in San Francisco, and I had a really long list of clients who were Yemenis, Yemeni-Americans, and also Yemenis abroad who would message me from Yemen and from Egypt and from different countries wanting help with their paperwork because they were effectively blocked. And unfortunately, that stayed in place for quite a few years. It has been repealed ever since, and families are slowly reuniting. But even before the ban, there has been a long delay of administrative processing when Yemeni Americans are trying to apply or reunite with their families back home. And lastly, and this is something new, I think you have heard about what's been happening in Palestine and Yemen kind of reacting to that crisis. And because of their actions, the Biden administration, along with the United Kingdom and another coalition that was formed, launched airstrikes on Yemen. So it's been what, almost a month of airstrikes, and I speak to family and colleagues back home, and there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. Um, so it's really a lot. To kind of get away from that grim for just a while, as far as how many Yemenis are in the US, because I get that question asked a lot. One can only guesstimate. Some reports say 100,000, others say 200,000. It's really impossible to know for sure because the census counts us, those that are Arab or from the Middle East or North Africa, as white. And a little bit of backstory, it's a complicated relationship that many people have with the MENA or Middle Eastern North Africa, those origins, having been entangled with whiteness because of the naturalization system that was in place in the 50s, which imposed racial restrictions on which immigrants would be able to become citizens. So like I said, the Arabs largely arrived in the late 1880s, and the earliest generation of immigrants from the Middle East and North Africa saw whiteness as the path towards claiming full rights in their new country, the US, America. There were several cases where Syrian immigrants emphasized their Christianity because it was considered a European religion and therefore are a marker of whiteness. So they argued that they were white in court because the only immigrants that could naturalize to become US citizens had to be found white by law. So, that's something that our ancestors did in order to be able to find a pathway towards citizenship. But unfortunately, and in reality, Arabs or those from the Middle East and North Africa are not seen as white. We don't have the experience of the lived experience of white people. And what this has done is actually created a disadvantage for Arabs because not only do we not count right now, we can't be counted for any of our needs, and that inhibits the services that our community gets. The amount of people that are voting or not voting for a particular president. So there's actually work being done by Arab-led organizations to be able to include MENA, MENA, which stands for Middle East and North Africa. And I know it's complicated because I already said that we don't want to subscribe to the Middle East, but in order to have some representation, unfortunately, that's kind of the pathway to go, and that will hopefully be able to count how many Arabs are in the U.S. And I know that number is much higher than a lot of the speculative reports. Okay, so I did mention post 9/11 and anti-Arab hate and how we're not counted. I think to understand what challenges Arab and Muslim American communities face, we must address anti-Arab sentiment and anti-Muslim sentiments or anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobia. We all know that biased attitudes towards unfamiliar has always been a part of the post-colonial American value system. We other people, and then we can justify treating them differently. A lot of communities have experienced this. The Irish, the Chinese, the Italians. I mean, insert a community of immigrants, and that has happened to them. So most marginalized communities have faced some form of othering. Like I said, if you demonize a community, you can shift perspective of the masses, even the world, right? Hatred and misunderstanding of Arabs and Muslims have been a global norm, unfortunately, since the 1800s. If we understand Orientalism, according to the late Edward Said and how his academic writings, he referred to the images painted in that time of Arabs, painted Arabs as inherently inferior, which laid a perfect primer for how Arabs and Muslims were treated following the tragic 9/11 attacks. So Islamophobia became institutionalized, unfortunately, and was coined, like I said, the war on terror by President Bush. So oftentimes you find this sentiment will justify a lot of pretty harmful and violent policies. So, the war on terror was a legal framework that scapegoated Muslims and Arabs. And I just want to quickly note, because oftentimes a lot of us in these spaces will talk about Arabs and Muslims together, but Muslims and Arabs are not synonymous. Not all Arabs are Muslims and not all Muslims are Arab. But we are collectively punished, unfortunately, impacted by some of the same foreign and domestic policies. So the war on terror narratives about Muslims portrayed Arabs and Muslims as inherently violent, as threatening, as potential threats. So this system justified all of the US foreign policies that I mentioned earlier. Many, if not all, Arab and Muslim communities have either been directly or indirectly impacted by anti-Arab racism or anti-Muslim hate or Islamophobia, either while living here in the US or, their loved ones experiencing it living abroad. So they carry it with them silently. So I brought a picture here of a Muslim girl wearing a hijab, and I wear a lot of hats or hijabs, but as an educator, I have seen on the ground, like in school sites, in the hallways, like the manifestation of what anti-Arab racism or Islamophobia, it often looks like bullying. And CARE stands for the Council of American on Islamic Relations. It's a civil rights organization that's national. There's chapters all across the country. And they released this bullying report that is based on a year's worth of data collection. And it reports that a staggering 55% of Muslim students in California reported being subjected to some form of bullying based on their religious identity, more than twice the national average for bullying in schools. So some of what youth have said, and I've taken this out of the CARE bullying report, is, and I quote, a lot of my classmates, and this is a student who's in the 4th grade, a lot of my classmates thought that Muslims shouldn't be allowed in the country, and one person said to me that Muslims are terrorists. Another student said, I have been called a terrorist before, and said that, someone told them that they did 9/11. Another student said, I have been personally experienced both anti-Arab and Islamophobia assaults physically. And I myself, after 9/11, I was pregnant with my first child. So I remember myself personally experiencing, and at that time I was living in Oakland, California, super progressive, very diverse city. But I was oftentimes called a lot of slurs. Terrorist was one of them, Osama bin Laden. And it's, verbal assault is not pretty, and it can make you feel unsafe, and I understand that there is a lot of work being done in the media industry to create this hysteria to hate a certain community or demographic. And it's happened to, like I said before, so many other communities. And we're, I don't know if we're the new boogeyman, but, we're amongst other, there's a lot of boogeymen, unfortunately, because of the media and the politicians and how they've painted certain communities, unfortunately. And it's just part of the system, unfortunately, the system of dehumanization. And the last point I'll say about this, it's really important to not be a bystander when it comes to situations like this, and if at all possible, be an upstander or an ally, because a lot of times these situations are very isolating, and it feels very lonely. Quickly here, I wanted to share a short video. This was made by a group of students at OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, where I used to work. These were some of my students, and I wanted to share like a snippet of it because it shows us and gives us kind of a some audio of how Muslim students, how they feel, in their own voice. So if I may play it briefly. Let me just.
Throughout entertainment and the public news aspects of the world, Arabs have been poorly represented. This is simply prejudice towards Islam and blatantly racist. For example, people in the US are constantly being fed with Islamophobic propaganda. From a personal standpoint, every year of my life at school we would commemorate 9/11. Now, every time we do this, we talk about Muslims and Arabs, of course. The teacher or staff member would give a poor idea of Muslims and Arabs. This would lead to a lot of students being prejudiced towards Muslims. Students in American schools always make jokes about Muslims, which lead to terrorism jokes. If schools would fix their representation of Muslims, these ignorant jokes would simply not happen. Furthermore,
Yeah, I always think it's important to hear what students have to say in their own voices. And, like I said, I can share the whole entire slides and then you'll find this video. It's also on YouTube. And it's a little bit disheartening to hear it from the kids. All right, my story. So this here is the collage of my family. Up there to the top left is my father's passport. You can see here, it's all in Arabic. And my mom there is in the bottom. That's me. That was in San Francisco after I was born. The top right is myself and my mom, and then my brother. And then the bottom right is my grandmother, who is my favorite person in the world. And she taught me who I am today. Everything about Yemeni culture I learned from her. So my father and mother immigrated from Yemen in 1972. They first arrived in New York. And how it works with, chain migration, it's almost like we are like birds. Because when somebody migrates, somebody tells somebody else, and then it's like, hey, you guys, it's safe here. We're going to raise our family here. Come on over. That's how it works. So somebody told my father, hey, New York is a place where you can raise a family. So then he brought my mom, and that's how it works. Like I said, with I think a lot of communities are this way, but I know specifically with the Yemeni community, it's really all about hearsay, or, sharing stories and opportunities with each other. So, my family moved to New York initially, and then they were like, you know what, it's too much hustle and bustle. So then they moved to Union City. And then they settled in San Francisco and the Tenderloin, and that's where I call home. And I will, I'll share a little bit more about the Tenderloin, but and I know it has a lot of different perspectives on what the Tenderloin means, and I'll share what it meant to us. The TL, or the Tenderloin, is known as the melting pot. The melting pot is the theory of that of multiculturalism, assuming that various immigrant groups will tend to just melt together, abandoning our individual cultures and eventually becoming fully assimilated into the predominant society. And, we all know that the melting pot model has been criticized for reducing diversity and causing people to lose their traditions, and for having to be enforced through government policies, because, we know that early immigrants weren't allowed to use their language. So the Tenderloin is very diverse, super diverse, and not just ethnically. I mean, there's all types of socioeconomic backgrounds as well. And it's a place that I have a bittersweet connection with. I'm not going to lie. It is a mosaic, There are a lot of Arabs and Muslims who live in the Tenderloin, and it's really initially it's because of what I said, is because of people moved and then they told other relatives and they told other friends. So now the Tenderloin has a really large amount of Yemeni Americans, Arab and Muslim Americans. And I have family who still live there right now, actually. And I call it bittersweet because I have a lot of amazing stories and a lot of really horrific stories, because it is a neighborhood that has been plagued with a lot of economic inequities, a lack of resources, and a lack of public support. And there are a lot of people struggling. And I showed here a picture of some of that. You know, this is what the Tenderloin looks like. It looks like a lot of joy and children that are happy, but it also looks like a lot of pain and a lot of unhoused people. Um, I shared a picture here to the left of Masjid at-Tawheed, and this is where I went to school on the weekends for Arabic and Quran school. A lot of Yemeni Americans and Muslim Americans attended this mosque to learn on the weekends, so we don't melt. We don't forget our culture and our language. And I can read and write and speak Arabic perfectly, and I attribute it to Masjid al-Tawheed, which is still in operation until today. It's on Sutter Street. So not necessarily all the way deep in the Tenderloin. It's a little bit, I don't even remember what's the name of that neighborhood, but it's part of the Tenderloin, but not so much deep in where I'm showing these pictures here. This picture here is of Turk Street. And Turk Street is known for having a really large number of Yemeni American families. And my aunt still lives there. And I was just there last week, actually, when I came out to visit the Bay. So some important people that you might have seen or heard of in the Bay. Up there to the top left is Bushra Al-Absi, who is my cousin. And I'm not trying to be biased here, but she is amazing. She's been in the Chronicle and in other outlets. She is an educator from the Bay Area, and she is such a she loves the Tenderloin. Like that is going to be home for her. She said, I'm going to live and die in the Tenderloin. So, you know, she is amazing, and she's still currently there. And then, of course, we have Mukhtar Al-Khanshali, who is from the Monk of Mocha. And I went to school with him on the weekends, like Geneffa said, but we are, you know, I'm much older than him, but I do remember his sisters were in my classroom, where after I learned Arabic, I then started teaching Arabic at the mosque, and his sisters were my students. And then we have there up to the top right, Asil Farah, who is a young Yemeni American, and he is super active as a community organizer, is working with the city of San Francisco on reform, shifting policies in the favor of disenfranchised communities, you know, obviously among them Yemeni American communities. And there's myself with the former Mayor Ed Lee, when I was working at the Asian Law Caucus. We worked on a city ordinance right after the Muslim ban, you know, was passed. You know, Trump said a lot of harmful things, but he also said that he was going to sign up all the Muslims that were coming into America. So we really quickly worked together with the city of San Francisco to pass a citywide ordinance that would prevent the city of San Francisco from doing that, from registering Muslims. So there wouldn't be a Muslim registry. And, you know, the late Mayor Ed Lee was a great supporter and ally in this work. Lastly, I talked a lot, and I wanted to give an opportunity for folks to ask questions or comments or any feedback, but I did provide a little bit of resources here. Really quickly, April is National Arab American Heritage Month. So this is an opportunity, if you work in a company or organization or whatever type of institution, to recognize Arab American Heritage Month, and you can recognize Yemeni Americans, and I'm happy to share along some resources. You know, oh, okay, it paused. Yeah, but anyways, I shared some links to different toolkits that can give you a lot more information on the history of Yemen and different Yemeni voices. and different articles. And I think I will pause here and give it back to Geneffa. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Wow, that was so educational. I took so many notes, right? And so I know we're going to really benefit from your slides. And you know, the college where I teach here locally, Cabrillo College, we are going to be doing starting events for April's Arab American Heritage Month, but we don't have ideas yet. So I'm going to be really digging deeply into your slides and seeing what we can do. So this is really exciting. So I would love to share, this is the time for us to share questions with Jehan. So if you want to pass me your cards, or Maddie, do you want to go around and collect some maybe? And yeah, I'll go ahead and while maybe you can just put them in the air if you have any cards with questions. Does anyone have any?
More cards.
Oh, you've been thinking you want to get more cards?
Taking
Yeah.
notes in my.
Okay, well,
I'm gonna make another round with the cards.
okay, well, I'm going to jump in there then while the cards are being collected. Jehan, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And what a long history of activism you have had in California. Can you talk to us a little bit about your work since you moved to Houston a year ago? What took you out there, and then what kind of work are you doing there? Has there been any overlap with your work in California and your experiences as being Yemeni American in Texas? Did you hear that?
I don't know if it's my audio or yours, Geneffa, but I was not able to hear you. I assume you were talking because I seen you moving, but I didn't hear
Very
you.
animated. I'll try that again.
Okay, let me just adjust my audio. It might be me because I still see you moving, but I don't hear it.
Don't hear me. Okay.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I hear you now.
Hear me
Something
now?
happened.
All right,
Yes.
good, great, thank you. Okay, so you've had a long history of activism in California, and you moved to Texas just over a year ago, sorry. But so we're wondering about your experience in Texas and in Houston specifically, and are you doing any similar work there? What took you there? What kinds of work are you doing in the community there? And do you see any overlaps in the experience?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. Everybody asks me, why in the world would you leave the Bay Area and go to Houston, Texas? Like, what are you thinking? Texas wants to separate itself from America, like what, from the rest of the country. Like, what are you doing? You know, and I will be frank here, economics. The Bay Area has become impossible to own a home in. And I'm a mother of 4, like I shared, and Texas, it's cheaper, to be honest with you. And also it's actually super diverse. It's beautiful. Outside, I was complaining to you, Geneffa, earlier, but the summers are brutal. Oh my God, it's very humid. But I really like it here. I like it here because it's diverse and folks are lovely and polite. Of course, the Bay Area will always be home. I visit it at least 2 to 3 times a year. I was just there last week. And the work that I'm doing now, I do a lot of virtual work. So I'm a culturally responsive educator. I do trainings for schools and organizations on how to become a more equitable, a more just, a more culturally responsive, where you're looking at culture as an asset as opposed to a deficit. I do that with organizations and schools. And then I also do foreign policy consulting because the war in Yemen and that's still my niche. I founded the Yemeni Alliance Committee out in the Bay Area actually in 2017, which works on pushing legislation away from militarization. So I'm doing some of the similar work, and it's been well received here. But honestly, a lot of my clients are in the Bay Area.
Okay, so you're able to work across
remotely.
that right? Yes.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Great, thank you. Well, we have quite a few questions here, so I'm just going to go through and see if we can cover as many as possible. So what is I'm just kind of reading them in the order they were handed to me. The first one here is about women in Yemen and whether they, how, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, but in terms of women's rights, women's activities, is there a lot of advancement and progress for women in Yemen, and what is their experience of life there in terms of having equal rights to men, ability to work, have an education, things like that?
Yeah, so that's a multi-layer question. So before the war, there isn't a barrier to either working or education. All of my family members are college graduates. They at least have bachelor's degrees. Others of them are in medicine and are doctors, and women are utilized in all facets of society in Yemen, but unfortunately, because of the war, women and girls are the most impacted because they end up carrying the burden of the family because maybe their male relatives or husbands are either fighting in the war, or they have passed, or they're either elsewhere trying to make a living. So then women and girls end up having to pull all of that weight. Another part of that is pregnant women are severely impacted because of the war. The war has destabilized the country and has really broken down its infrastructure. So there are a lot of diseases as a result of that. Disease like waterborne diseases, for example, such as cholera and diphtheria and dengue fever. Like these are diseases that have been eradicated decades ago, but because of the war, they're making a comeback, unfortunately. So, the situation is very grim right now for everyone. And of course, women and girls are mostly impacted. But before this time, obviously villages and different rural areas, just like here in the States, women have a much harder time with access and opportunities. But the current situation, everyone is doing really poorly.
Yes. And thank you for punctuating that this is the war, like the war has been a big part of this, and it's not necessarily Yemeni culture, but that it's a result of the conditions. I think that's important to highlight. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I like this question because I'm an English professor, and the question is, literature is a great bridge between cultures. Can you name a couple of authors which are inspiring, and maybe name a couple of their novels that will give us the heart and soul of Yemen? Maybe after we read The Monk of Mocha, or what would be the good follow-up book?
Oh boy, to be quite frank, there isn't a lot in English. To be honest with you about Yemen, there is a lot of beautiful stories in Arabic. But a specific author, there are quite a few Yemeni-American scholars that do talk about Yemen and talk about the experience of Yemen or being a Yemeni. For example, Dr. Walid Mahdi. Actually, some of the authors, they're listed in this toolkit that I provided here. So I can also put it in the chat if that's easier. But honestly, the best writings about Yemen are in Arabic, and I really hope that one day they can be translated over into English. But right now this is where we are, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, we can learn Arabic. I mean,
Yes.
right? Okay, so this is an interesting question. In terms of Yemen's population, what is the percentage roughly of Muslims in Yemen, and then Shia, Sunnis, different sects, and how many are more secularized and non-religious? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so like I said, Yemen is a Muslim majority country, so over 90% or even 95% are Yemeni. We do have a small population of Jewish Yemenis who have been there for centuries. So when it comes to a breakdown between, so Shia is not a majority sect in Yemen, it's actually Zaydi. There are 60% Zaydi Yemenis to 40% Sunni. So, and let me just quickly, you know, a disclaimer, because a lot of times what is happening in Yemen is painted as a sectarian issue. Zaydis and Sunnis, or even Shias, who are a fairly new population, have lived in Yemen for centuries, intermarried, coexisted without any problems or violence. What is happening, what has been happening ever since 2015 is not sectarian. It's geopolitical.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you for emphasizing that. And so a great follow-up question here is, what were the principal issues fueling the civil war in Yemen then? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, can you say anything more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to 2011 when during the Arab Spring, when there were uprising all across the Middle East and North Africa, and Yemen was one of the first countries to also participate in trying to realize a democratic spirit or a democratic wave. It was among the first after Egypt and Tunisia. You know, as you probably all know, we had a 30 plus year long dictator, Ali Abdullah Saleh, in place. And he just would not let go of his you know, political power that he's held onto for over 3 decades. You know, folks were coming out into the streets, all types of Yemenis, all political affiliations, all ideologies, women, children, marginalized communities poured into the streets, really wanting to realize a Yemen that was more pluralistic, more diverse, and it was peaceful all the way until 2014. In 2014, internal clashes began. So there's obviously political factions in Yemen, like any other country, and those political factions, you know, began fighting, so it was all over power, lack of political representation. There's a lot of economic suppression happening over this period of time, you know, over the 3 decades. So there was like a, you know, there was like a vacuum. Civil war took place in 2015 between the government that was internationally recognized by the West and the Houthis, or Ansarullah. But obviously in March of 2015, like I had mentioned in one of the slides, that civil war was no longer civil. Well, you know, can we agree that there's no such thing as a war being civil? Okay. There's nothing civil about a war, right? But in March of 2015, that civil war, or that local native war, turned into a regional inferno because Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates intervened, equipped with US-made weaponry. So they began launching airstrikes from above, so completely annihilating Yemen's airspace within a day. So that war continued from 2015 all the way until just last year. And now there's been peace negotiations, and unfortunately there are new airstrikes now, not led by Saudi Arabia, but instead led by the Biden administration and the UK. So, you know, like I said, politics, power, you know, change, transformation, you know.
Did we lose?
No, I think she's fine.
Okay, we just finished. All right. So you mentioned the UK, and a follow-up question is, someone wanted to know, are there more Yemeni in the EU than US, in Europe than the US? And what city in Europe would have the largest number of Yemeni immigrants, as far as you know?
Wow.
Trivia. We're doing
I don't know if I know, to be honest with you, but I know that both the US and the UK have a really large number of concentrated Yemeni population. When Yemenis began migrating outside of Yemen, like I said, because of the relationship or entanglement that Yemen had or Britain had with Yemen, Yemenis automatically shifted to the UK. So there's a large population there, but like I said before, people are like, hey, I think you're going to do better here. So I think a lot of families ended up coming to the US, but honestly, I can't give you a number. There isn't really a system that calculates, where we're moving accurately yet.
Yeah. My guess would be London would have.
Yeah, London has a large concentration. Yeah. London is sort of like maybe Detroit, if we compare. Yeah.
Yeah, the Yemen, outside the Yemen. Okay, so now we're back to America and education. And a question is, are the Yemeni-American high school students, especially girls, able to go on to college? Is there financial support, family support? Is there a healthy percentage of Yemeni-American students going to college, or are you a sort of outlier there?
That's a good question. Actually, one of my contracts is with AAYSP that you mentioned earlier, which stands for the American Association of Yemeni Students and Professionals. And the essence of our work is trying to mitigate the barriers and challenges that Yemeni American students and families face in their access to college and higher education. So, like a lot of people of color, there are a lot of barriers, and some of them are either language, either the students themselves maybe not speaking proficient English enough, or maybe their families do not speak English. And then that obviously poses a barrier because they cannot help in the process of, it's kind of tedious to fill out FAFSA and the college application and all of that, so that's a barrier. Finances is a barrier because sometimes either, and I found this very disheartening, because a lot of our Yemeni families do not know that they can qualify for FAFSA or financial aid. So a lot of the work that AAYSP does is goes into the community and talks to families and says, hey, you can get free money to go to college, because, a lot of our communities were like, we can't afford it. It's like, what, $30, $50 a unit or whatever. And, you need to be full-time, and they're just doing the math, and it's just not, it's not feasible financially. And then I think another barrier is while there are a lot of Yemeni Americans that have, beat the odds and graduated and are doing a lot of amazing things, there's still not enough role models out there to show that, hey, you know what, we are here, you can do it, I did it. Do you know what I mean? So there's not enough of us out there that can really show the youth like, hey, you can do this because we did it, So when it comes to the boys and the girls, it's interesting because historically, girls have been at a disadvantage because of a lot of different reasons, whether their families are afraid to let them go out to college or to travel, more afraid for the girls because of their safety. Now we're seeing the opposite happening. So now we're seeing a larger number of girls and young women going to college and excelling. And we're seeing the number for boys become really stagnant in comparison to like a decade ago, for example. So, and I think that's because a lot of Yemeni American women are much more, a lot of us are out there, and we have been in the community and are on social media trying to really penetrate, homes and phones and devices to let them know that, you can do it, we did it, so I think it's a battle. It's an uphill battle, because there's so many different factors that exist that pose a challenge, and racism is obviously another challenge, so we're trying our best to try to ensure that all of our community is successful, because we believe that one person's success is everyone's success. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think we're like the train that could. We're chugging along.
Yeah. Well, and I want to congratulate you that when we were talking earlier, 2 of your kids are in universities in California right now.
Yes. One already graduated. She's an alumni, SJSU. The other one is graduating in May.
Yeah, so that's good. I think absolutely that's great. And I think it's good for us to realize that Yemeni people have been immigrating here for decades now, and yet so many of the students in universities are first-generation college students, right?
Right.
So these are not just recent immigrants who are first-generation college students. This is after decades of being here and serving in this state and in this country. So it's not the time for us to be first-generation college students, right? So making sure that gets matched up so that there's this robust intergenerational educational path is a great goal, and you're doing it, so thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
And I was thinking, so that here's another follow-up question in terms of the work you do for culturally responsive teaching. Do educational institutions in Texas encourage and pay for experts like you to do culturally responsive training in the school systems and diversity training? Because you talk about a lot of clients out here, but out there.
Well, not yet, because I have the load I have right now is it's a lot. And I haven't, I'm fairly new here, so I don't know if I can call Houston home. I don't know if I've been out there enough, but I'm slowly getting to know folks in the system here in Houston, and I've seen some interest. So, knock on wood, maybe I'll get a new client here and try to spread awareness and spread understanding, because I think that's what the essence of all of this is understanding, and that's why you all are here, and that's why we're talking about this, is really understanding our differences and trying to respect them and honor them in a way that is dignifies that community, right? So the short answer is not yet, but hopefully.
Yes, great, thank you. Well, this has just been so amazing, so edifying, and I'm going to end with a question that is you've sort of already addressed, but I think it's still worth mentioning, is that Cabrillo College, our local community college, has a Children's Peace Center, a Children's Peace Education Anti-Bias Library for children. So we are always on the lookout for resources for children's books that can bring that awareness and visibility of communities that we don't necessarily see on, or may not knowing, they may not know that they're interacting with Yemeni Americans, and so those books would be really useful. Now, I know that from what you said, those titles don't exist yet. I don't know that there are children's books. Oh, there are?
Yes. Yeah, there are. I have 2 colleagues actually that wrote books about Yemen in English for children. So yeah, I can send you those over.
Great, that would be fantastic. Julie over here and Amelia, I know will be interested in those. And we'll get those to the library, and we will keep growing our world. As a result of you coming into our world this evening and sharing from your heart, this has been, I think it's fed our hearts, our brains, our spirits, and has been just beautiful. So thank you again.
Thank you. Oh, I appreciate you all. This has been so heartwarming for me. So I'm also fulfilled as well. I appreciate you all.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. And I want to say thank you also to everybody in the audience today. It is truly reassuring and exhilarating for me as an educator to see so many in our community interested in Arab and Muslim cultures and our presence here in the United States. And there's never sort of a moment where you get to relax and go, well, things are okay now, right? There's always that sense of insecurity and uncertainty. But moments like this really build that sense of critical mass where no, here we are doing the work, we're caring, we're educating ourselves and each other. And events like this, thanks to our community reads and Friends of the Library, are really making a difference. So I'd like also to applaud Denise for her work. So be safe out there in the weather, and thank you for being here. And remember, we have events coming up.